everyone, and welcome back into Holy Chaos on Tap. I am your host, Nick, an average Catholic dad who has learned repeatedly that just because I have a plan doesn't mean God is remotely interested in that plan. Glad you're here, whether you're a repeat listener or a first-time listener. Super excited you found the show. If this is your first time listening to this podcast, let me give you a brief explanation of what I do here, because I know there's been a few probably new listeners that pop into various episodes. So first, yes, I am a Catholic, and yes, I am a dad, and I am a dad of 3 great, unbelievable, marvelous kids, at least from my perspective. One soon to be a 6-year-old, and twins who are soon to be 3. And I am right at that perfect time of my life where we are on repeat for the same shows and movies over and over and over again. So one day, while praying at adoration, a thought came into my head. And I sometimes struggled to know if the thought in my head is my own subconscious, my own mind wandering, or could it be something divine, a message from God? And I think a lot of us are probably like that too. I'm sure a lot of us have that internal voice that, you think is probably yourself more than not, but it's hard to tell, especially when you're praying, if a thought that comes into your head is from God or just your own mind wandering. But each week the thought became clearer and more focused, and it centered around starting a podcast about being a Catholic dad. Okay, great. Just what the world needs, another podcast. How about some water? You want some water too? Because we don't have enough water either. But again, an interesting thought came into my head. We as dads with little kids watch the same shows and movies over and over and over again. And we as dads sometimes just have to sit through them on repeat. But what if we could find the deeper spiritual messages in those shows and movies to not only bring us closer to God, but also help us make better fathers? As I say, I'm an average Catholic dad, and I'm just trying to be a bit above average. So that is the evolution of this podcast and our season, Raising Little Saints with TV Screens. I have created 9 episodes and centered around the shows and movies we all watch on repeat with our kids. And today, episode 110 is a good one because we're talking about Cars, a movie about speed, ambition, pride, and the spiritual value of getting stuck in places you never intended to be. Because fatherhood, career, marriage, life, they all have a way of forcing detours that we don't expect. And Cars shows us why those detours might actually be where God does his best work. So, let's hit the road and talk episode 110, Cars, Humility and God's Detour Plan. All right, Dad, so typically when I start these shows, I raise my glass and talk about the drink that I am having. After all, the show is called Holy Chaos on Tap. However, I am doing what I think a lot of dads do, and I'm doing a dry January along with a fast. So my on tap this week is a non-alcoholic drink. It is, in another episode I did, Luca, which was very Italian themed. I drank Peroni, and I'm drinking Peroni again, but it's the non-alcohol version of Peroni. So it tastes great, keeps me on my fitness goals for the year, and keeps me on the dry January kick. So each year I try to do a dry January, and really it's centered around the fact for us there are so many social events between Halloween and New Year's. Literally, I feel like once Halloween is coming around, it's like party, get together, gathering. It's like you're always doing stuff. And so there's just a lot going on, and I like to have a month where I sort of just hit the reset button. And the reset button for me is obviously January, and I have once again kicked off the dry January month. But this month I've added in a weekly fast as well. And I've committed to saying the rosary on more of my daily walks. So kicking off the year, trying to get healthier physically, mentally, and spiritually. So not sure about you, but I've been up and down in my fitness life. I think a lot of us dads have been. The dad 10, the dad 15, however many pounds you put on once you have a kid. But for me, I went from playing sports competitively in school, to rec sports, to not doing anything, to then running marathons and obstacle races, just all over the place, from being as fit as I could to not being fit at all. But I would have to say my slow decline from when I was the fittest in my life to now started actually in 2020, which was the COVID year. And honestly, it's no surprise. I think a lot of people kind of fell off the fitness wagons a bit when COVID hit. But I sustained a pretty bad, severe ankle injury in February of that year playing soccer. And then the COVID lockdown started. And then we had our first son in April. And I never got to a really healthy, fully rehab program with my ankle, and my running program just sort of went away. And ever since then, I would start and stop my workouts, mostly stopping because of another injury or having twins, but mainly injury. It just seemed like every time I felt like I was making progress, another thing happened in my life. The most recent happening last fall, when again, I was back to running. I was back to playing rec sports, rec soccer, and feeling good about getting in shape. And then I tore my calf muscle. Back on the bench, not feeling so good about myself. And it's been the story for me probably the last 6 years, and has been a real struggle for me because running used to be just an easy, fun thing I could do for exercise. And I say easy and fun in a sense that all I had to do was put on my shoes and just go out the door. There was really no, there's no gym membership. There's no weights that you have to buy. There's no program. You just go out for a run. But something keeps coming up for me and happening to my body. And I don't know why. It's just like, it's just another thing after another thing. And tearing the calf muscle was the most recent thing. But I keep setting a plan, keep trying to execute, trying to get back into shape. And then that is when, I start back over again. So that's again what I'm doing in January of this year. So January, dry January, here in January, finally back to running and running 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm working out, trying to be smart about my ankle injuries, knee injuries, and just going slow, trying not to slide back into another injury rut. But honestly, in reality, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, you know what I hope happens today? I hope the plans I made just completely fall apart. No one says that. No one says, I hope I get up and another injury happens that sets me back another month, another 2 months. I hope I get slowed down. I hope everything takes twice as long as it should. But if you're a parent, especially a dad and a working dad, you already know this truth. Life is basically a series of detours you did not request. They just pop up. We always feel like we are heading somewhere important, a meeting, a deadline for work, a goal, a version of yourself you thought you'd become. For me, when it comes to setting a workout plan, there are other things outside of injuries that have really always popped up and derailed me in the past, specifically around kids. Kids get sick, and they never get sick at the same time. So I've mentioned I've had 3 kids. So it's like one kid gets sick, they start to get better than the other one, and then it's like a cycle. It just goes through the house, and they rotate, drawing out the longevity of the sickness further, preventing you from doing what you might have set out to do. You set a plan in place, and then all of a sudden you missed one workout, you missed one run, you didn't go to work that day, you had to call in, or you had to be on parent duty and you missed a meeting. Kids could have after school events or doctor's appointments or just normal kid stuff where they're causing havoc and wrecking your day and timing. I'm sure there are other things that suddenly pop up too outside of kids, maybe a job change or house maintenance or errands you have to run, and suddenly your priorities shift, your energy disappears, your timeline explodes, and now you're driving along a road you didn't plan to be on, searching for a way back onto the interstate of life, and the cop lights come on. And that's where the story of Lightning McQueen begins. So at the start of Cars, Lightning McQueen is obviously fast. He's cocky. He's a rookie. He's taken the circuit by storm, and he's proud of it. Speed is his identity, winning is his worth, and success is his proof that he matters. And honestly, that's not just a race car problem. A lot of us, especially dads, are wired that way. We measure ourselves by productivity, achievement, progress, output, speed, and we want the fastest route to success, the most efficient path, the clearest, fastest, cleanest climb to the top. And in episode 109 in Kanto, Healing the Family You've Been Given, I mentioned how you can't just fix things in 30 minutes and brought up all those DIY shows and where they completely change a room or a house in 30 minutes. But in reality, it takes weeks and months to do that work. And again, as a dad, as a husband, I want speed, efficiency, progress now. And that's why I have a hard time with those shows in terms of my own life. I want my projects done now in 30 minutes or less. Instant gratification. But that's not life. And that's not reality. Even though, I mentioned in the last show, it's called reality TV, but it's not real. I know when I went from couch potato to marathon runner, it was a year journey of working out, eating right, managing stress and sleep, being on a consistent running program and continued repeated patterns day in and day out. I didn't just decide to go out and run a marathon. I'm not Barney Stinson. There you go. A reference to How I Met Your Mother. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check it out. That was an episode of How I Met Your Mother where Barney Stinson said anybody can run a marathon. You just start running. But in reality, it takes training and time. And I took a lot of pride in how I could just go out and run 6 to 7 miles at a pretty good clip. I was no Olympian by any means, but I was very, I think, above average for my age and mile time. And I'm entering my 10th year of marriage this year and my 6th year of being a dad. And if my movie started at the beginning of my marriage, I'm sure I would look kind of like Lightning McQueen, maybe a little bit, but life gives you detours, and especially when you're getting married and when you are married and when you have kids, a lot of detours pop up. The year I was getting married, I signed up for my 5th marathon. It was a way for me to stay focused and in shape leading up to the wedding. And my first detour of that year was I changed positions at work. And that resulted in a bit more travel, which made training a bit tough, but I was still able to, somewhat get my training runs in and stay on a schedule. But then I had a very difficult time when 3 months before my wedding, my mom died. And that was a huge detour. My mom got sick, went in the hospital, and she was put on life support. And that obviously completely derailed my training. And it was right at the end of my training when I was supposed to be hitting the most miles that I could as I was ramping up towards the marathon. And training runs were just skipped. I just didn't go for runs. I didn't work out. I wasn't eating right, because I was at the hospital, where I should have been. But it was my worst, it was the happiest and worst time of my life, because I was obviously preparing for my wedding, but at the same time, my mom was in the hospital and then eventually passed away. Then it was a week after my mom was laid to rest that I actually went out and ran my marathon. And I'm not gonna. It's not a happy story where I was like, oh, it was the best marathon I ever ran. I was like, motivated, and I had the best time ever. It was my worst marathon I've ever run, the worst time I ever had, and time as far as like how long it took me to do. And I didn't care, honestly. I ran with a rosary in my hand and said as many rosaries as I could in memory of my mom as I completed that marathon. I took a very difficult time, a few detours, and turned it into the most positive thing I think I could at the time. So how can I relate this to cars? Well, I didn't take a wrong turn in my wedding year, but I did have detours. Lightning McQueen takes one wrong turn, a detour, on his way to California and ends up in Radiator Springs. He's definitely not taking a shortcut. It's definitely not a pit stop. He was stripped of his one thing that he felt defined him, his speed, stripped of control, stripped of relevance. This just isn't a plot device or a plot point for the movie. It's a spiritual pattern. At that very difficult time in my life, it was a full stop for me. And I didn't understand it and could have easily, crumbled and turned away from God and not understood the reasoning for why my mom being called home was what God was what God thought was important. And instead of having her stay here for my wedding, it's God's plans. You don't know what. Sometimes you don't know what the point of some things are. You just gotta trust in God. But I turned toward God instead of away from God for strength, and leaned into the rosary more than I had before, and I think in my entire life. It probably was the actual genesis of me taking my rosary with me on walks, or praying the rosary on a walk, opposed to just walking and listening to music. In life, though, we all start on a path we believe we want or should be on, or we make plans that we think we are going to have executed perfectly. Family life is not a smooth trip down the highway with no detours. All it takes is one family vacation road trip to know that. You're loading the kids up in the car, going on a road trip, and I guarantee you it's not going to be a complete smooth trip with no stops along the way. Detours are just going to happen, and Scripture tells us something uncomfortable, but something deeply true and impactful. The human heart plans the way, but the Lord directs the steps. Translation: you make the plans, God makes the roads. It's the old saying, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. It's important to remember, though, detours aren't punishment, they're formation. Radiator Springs became the place where Lightning McQueen learns a lot of important lessons that he needed to learn to become a better person or a better car. Patience, humility, relationship, community, service, empathy, things he could never learn if he slept his whole way ride in the back of Mac on his way to California. And here's the hard truth for us dads. Fatherhood slows us down on purpose in a good way. Not because God wants less from you, but because he wants more of you. Slowing down reveals who we are when achievement is taking away. I became a father right when the COVID lockdowns started. There's a lot of people out there, I'm sure, that are just like me, that had their first son or daughter born during the COVID lockdowns. And I often look back at that time and I wonder, what if there was no COVID? I would probably be still driving to work each day, working long hours and having minimal time with my kids, because I have to leave early because of traffic, and I'm stuck in traffic on the way home, and I'm just gone all day. But that detour was a massive one. COVID was a massive one. It changed how businesses operate. I was at home way more than dads in the past were. I got to see my son grow up, and I got to be around him way more than I probably could have ever imagined. My day job my company that I worked for, which is my day job because I do this at night, leaned into the remote work home lifestyle balance, and that slowdown was the best slowdown that has ever happened to me. And now, 3 kids later, because I have the oldest and then twins, I am basically daddy Uber. My wife, being a teacher, doesn't have the flexibility that I have, and I can take and pick up the kids from school and daycare. I can be home for my kids at the beginning and the end of the day. I'm more of a father than I ever dreamed was possible, and that is the most important thing in my life, being a great father and being a good husband. When Lightning McQueen is in Radiator Springs, he has to do something different. He has to do something outside of what he's used to, which is just being fast. He has to listen. He has to show up. He has to work slowly, notice people, care. And the irony, he thinks he is wasting time, but this time is what makes him actually great. As dads, this hits close to home a little bit, and I think we all sometimes might feel like this, but with the busy life of work and answering phone calls and emails and doing everything except maybe being around your family, you think, I'll be present later, or I'll slow down once things settle down at work, or I'll enjoy this time more when I'm done with this task or this chore. But kids don't grow on a schedule. Kids grow all the time, and they grow fast. The detour off our tasks is the work. Psalm 37:23 says, "The valiant one whose steps are guided by the Lord, who will delight in his way." The steps of a brave person are guided by the Lord. Not the leaps, not the sprints, not the fast 30-minute DIY projects that take weeks and months to actually complete. It's the steps to get to where you want to be. God often does his deepest shaping works at walking speed. God's time is definitely not on our time. And that's one thing that I've struggled with quite a bit is it's like, again, I want things now. I want things instant. When I pray for something, I want it now. And God has a different time scale than I do. God knows what we can handle and the time it takes. And having that type of faith and patience in God's timing is something that I think a lot of us really need to work on. Humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's thinking less about yourself. I have a hard time with this, trying not to think everything is about me. I don't think I'm egotistical or self-absorbed in any way, but I sometimes have a tendency to think more things are about me than thinking that they really are. And sometimes my wife even has to remind me, it's not about you. So I do have to have more humility and think less about me. During Lightning McQueen's detour in life, when he has to slow down, he doesn't lose greatness, he redefines it. In James 4:6, it's reminded to us that God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Grace doesn't flow at top speed, it flows where we stop striving. Fatherhood humbles me so much, and I'm sure it humbles you as well on a daily basis. Kids expose my impatience. I think I'm definitely an impatient person, but kids definitely expose how impatient I am, which from time to time I obviously struggle with. At the end of the day, I will sometimes ask my wife, was I too impatient in this situation when dealing with the kids? I actually just asked last night. One of our twins, the boy, was just having a complete meltdown at bedtime. He's in this phase where it's like he doesn't, like, if he wants mom to do something, he's like, no, mama do. If he wants dad to do something, he says, no, dada do. And so my wife is working with the girl twin, getting her dressed, and he was just absolutely losing it, saying he didn't want me to change his diaper, get him in pajamas. And I was just, I was struggling. And so, I eventually, changed his diaper, changed his pajamas as he was crying. And, then I asked my wife, I said, was I impatient in this situation when dealing with the kids? And it's not failure to have those types of moments. It's not bad to go back and look at it or review how you behaved or if you're impatient in a situation. It's really growth and formation. And here's the question every dad eventually has to face. What if success looks different now than what I imagined it to be? And in my younger days, success for me was running a half marathon in a certain amount of time or achieving a certain title at work. But what if success is not losing my patience every time I'm dealing with a kid melting down? What if success is just being present with my family and it's not a promotion? When Lightning McQueen leaves Radiator Springs, he still races, but he races differently, with perspective, with restraint, with love for others. Before his detour, spoiler alert, I'm assuming everybody has seen Cars by this point, but Lightning McQueen would have definitely won the Piston Cup and not cared that Strip Weathers crashed on the last lap. But he changed. He has perspective now. He has love for others. We see in the beginning of the movie when his agent Harv asked the names for his comp ticket. So he has his big final race against the King and Chick Hicks, and he gets comp tickets to give to his friends. And Harv asked, just give me the names of the people you want to come to the race, to the Piston Cup race. And Lightning struggled. And he was a bit sad because he couldn't name any friends. He craved the connection, but he was too caught up in the lifestyle and the drive to be successful. He wasn't slowing down enough to enjoy the most important thing, togetherness with loved ones. Micah 6:8 gives us the roadmap. You have been told, O mortal, what is good and what the Lord requires of you. Only to do justice and to love goodness and to walk humbly with your God. Not sprint, not dominate, walk. And sometimes that's how it feels when God is answering your prayers. It's at a walking speed, not a sprint and not fast. And that's the vocation of fatherhood. Again, I mentioned before his detour, Lightning McQueen would have definitely won the Piston Cup and not cared that the King crashed on the last lap. But Lightning McQueen does something unexpected. He gives up a win to help someone else finish. That's humility made visible. That's maturity. That's fatherhood. Choosing relationship over recognition. Choosing love over applause. Choosing people over your pride. You won't be in the company newsletter, and you definitely are not getting a raise or a promotion because of that. Those moments don't make headlines, but they shape souls, and they help form little saints, which is what we're all trying to do. So this week, try thinking about one detour you've been fighting. Not one you've taken, but one that's currently trying to happen that maybe you're fighting. Maybe one that you don't know if you really want to take, but maybe you should take, or maybe you're thinking about taking. Stop fighting it. Slow down, show up, pray, and let God do his work there. Luke 14:11. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. So let's finish today with a quick lightning prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. May God bless the roads you didn't choose. May he form you in the places you feel stuck. And may you discover that the detour is not delaying your calling, it's shaping it. Amen. All right, thanks again for listening. You can support the show 3 very easy ways. 1, follow Holy Chaos on Tap, on Instagram and on YouTube. Each like or comment helps expand our dad network so we know we are not alone. Even if it's just a thumbs up or a cheers in the comments, it all goes a long way. Share the content with other dads. You can either tag them in a video or a reel or share an episode with them. And you can also buy me a coffee through my website, Holy Chaos on Tap. You can send $1, $5, $10, whatever you want to do to support the show. Think of it as sharing a cup of coffee with me or a bottle of wine. And I don't have Patreon or hidden content that is exclusive to memberships, so you get all of me for absolutely free. But if you feel inclined to share a drink with me, you can do that via holychaosontap.com. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, cheers.